Given the limited time, others have spoken about the very important issue that just transition is not named. I would suggest that in section 3, subsection 3 and page 7, given that there's A to Y, the space Z, which is missing, would be a natural place for just transition to go. There seems to be a gap in there, and it is not the same as climate justice. And also, both climate justice and just transition need definition, because these are not abstract terms. Just transition, for example, has been heavily defined by the ILO, and that is reflected in the Paris Agreement. I am concerned. My primary concern is that we have regard to that has been spoken about, but more importantly, there are factors here which are concrete, solid commitments Ireland has already made, and it seems that there is a walking back away from them. I'd like to know why there is not an interim target in the bill. You said in your statement the intention is for 7% every year to reach a certain amount by 2030. Why is that not in the bill? And why should we as legislators not want to see it in the bill? It is the bird in the hand, it's what's before us, rather than, relying on what future birds there might be and what future bushes might remain. It has to be dealt with here in the bill. Why is there not a separate section? And there's a lack of kind of clarity, because on page, there is a section where you say, for the purposes of performing functions under 6B and 6D, they'll have regard to the matter specified in paragraphs A to D. But it doesn't say that it won't have regard to all those other caveats and all those other issues. Are you suggesting that for 6B and 6D, you will only have regard to the factors in A to D? That's the greenhouse inventory and others. Also, why are we speaking about Article 2 of the UNFCCC? What about the other articles? Are we just deciding that we're going to not worry about them? Where's Article 4, for example, which commits to put the highest possible ambition in terms of our achievement of the goals? That's a real concern to me. We signed up to the UNFCCC. In terms of mitigation or adaptation commitments, the European Union targets, we speak about them as obligations. If they are obligations, why aren't they in the bill? Can we have the rationale for not putting a strong 2030 target in the bill? It seems to me legislatively poor and inconsistent with agreements we have made, and indeed with other things we've signed up to. And there's another caveat and problem with the 2030 piece being missing, which is that the Sustainable Development Goals, which are part of Agenda 2030, have vanished. They're not in the bill. There's a provision for sustainable development, but there's nothing about the Sustainable Development Goals, which are a concrete set of measures, specifically relevant, for example, not just on climate, but the ones on sustainable cities would surely be relevant to the bill and to the roadmaps being drawn up. Those are 2030 targets. Is it because you have simply focused on one named figure, 2050, that you have left out the SDG and the related targets and commitments of Ireland that are in that? My other concerns in terms of factors, I won't have time to dwell on them, but the use of value for money, that's not defined, and we know that there's a lot of movement on that in terms of even in procurement now. We talk about most economically advantageous, price-quality ratio and so forth. Value for money is an outdated term that isn't usual to be used. I'm particularly concerned by the provision of a line, the policy of the government on climate change. That's put on a par with what we've signed up to at the UN and the EU. I mean, if the policy of a future government on climate change is we're not that worried, does that cancel out everything? We pass legislation all the time in these houses, and it is not the usual practice to have a get-out clause for any future government that says, unless, of course, that particular minister doesn't really want to. It's an extraordinarily unusual legislative measure. I'm concerned as well in relation to the inclusion of the phrase carbon leakage. I think it goes against clear language requirements. The fact that you have to include a definition is clear. It's not a commonly used phrase. I would suggest that it is intentionally confusing. I think if I asked any person in the public what carbon leakage means, they wouldn't mean we have to compete with people or we lose business. That's not what they think it means. They think it means emissions. So we need to have clear language. If you want to put competition in there, put it in, and then we'll try and take it out. Or if you want to talk about non-territorial emissions, let's put that in. My final question, and these are all questions to the bill, to the legislative aspects of the bill. In relation to page 28, I'm extremely concerned that there's a suggestion that where the greenhouse gas emissions, in a wonderful scenario where somehow our emissions in a previous budget go under the target, that we actually reduce emissions more than a set target, that we'll just carry them over and we'll use them in the next 5 years. How does that compatible with the highest possible ambition and with principles of climate justice? Again, we really need to remember when we're drafting this bill, much you can't negotiate with the coronavirus, you also can't negotiate with climate. There can't be, Christmas and birthday logic or we'll pay you Tuesday. We need to nail this down. And the last thing, people have said there is no clear accountability in this bill. I'm not interested that in 2050 we all look back and say which of the in-between ministers was responsible. Was it the advisory committee? What I would know that as legislators, I think, the legislation is the piece we're responsible for. That's what we need to answer for. And I'd like us to know that the legislation is succeeding by 2030. If you could address those issues, thank you.